Hello friends, in this video we're going to look at this Klipsch ProMedia 2.1 subwoofer. This subwoofer is part of a larger ProMedia 2.1 system that includes a controller and satellite speakers. I've already pulled the guts out of this, which comes out in one unit. So that gives us a chance to look in the back immediately. We see a few things here. A manufacturing date of 2009 it looks like. We've got our speaker driver here. And we've got this strange drain pipe thing, which is actually connects to the porting vent on the front. It has this Klipsch Lucasfilm THX logo on it. THX is some sort of brand certification that lets you have some idea of the sound quality of the unit. Got our blank area where this unit comes in. We'll look at that shortly. But while we've got this open, let's look at our general construction. We've got, this is probably particle board of some kind. A little metal grill over the driver unit. Driver unit appears to be maybe 6 inches. Here you can see the particle board. This is a sort of a fiber board rather than a true particle board. I bought this for $24 at a thrift store with the hope that it had some value. I kind of got excited about the Klipsch name because that's one of the premium speaker names. But I think what's happened to Klipsch and maybe some of the other premium speaker names is they've had to go down market into computer speakers and sound bars because people aren't buying premium speakers in a traditional sense of a, you know, high-end audiophile type stereos. That market has probably diminished greatly, although it's still out there. You can see this has some condition problems. This decal's coming off. This is a gasket that went with the rest of the unit. Part of the gasket stuck to that. Overall, this is not in great condition, so it's a kind of a fix or salvage type unit from my perspective. I may have overpaid for this even at the $24 level, but you know, we'll have fun with it anyway. One problem it has, which might be why the previous owner got rid of it, is that this speaker terminal is broken. That really can't be repaired intact. It could be replaced, or what I think would be pretty simple is to, you know, solder in a maybe an alligator clip there instead or something. So let's look at what's going on here. We've got an AC power cord draped around the back, power switch, our stereo speaker outputs, and this input connector, which is a 6-pin DIN connector that's commonly used on computer speaker systems. That gives us a hint of what's going on here. I think in effect this is basically a high-end computer speaker system. So if you're tired of lousy computer speakers, which you know you can get for approximately 20 bucks or so on the low end, and you are willing to spend a couple of $100, you know, this might be the thing for you when it was made, at least in 2009. So next we'll start looking inside this amplifier unit. So let's take a little tour here. This is the output connector that goes to the speaker driver. I pulled that off in the disassembly process. We've got this very substantial transformer here, which is a good sign. We've got a linear power supply here, 2 full wave bridge rectifiers, some large capacitors. So just kind of at a glance, this appears to be a pretty good power supply, kind of in conjunction with this large transformer, so there's a lot of good things going on there. If we tilt it up, we can see how these things relate better. Here's the stereo speaker outputs that go to, looks like 3 wires. It seems like the ground wires on stereo speakers are always connected together in my experience. I don't know if that's universally true, but that's what I've seen. We've got this little adapter board here that connects to the input. And I've done some research on this. The control unit that it uses, it's kind of an active control unit that actually receives power plus and minus 15 volts through this connector. It has some fairly simple op-amp and filtering circuitry in it. And I think what it does basically is it returns the subwoofer signal back to this unit, as well as the stereo signals, you know, with volume and balance applied maybe. So one of the bad things about this connector, this is the backside in this kind of tan color, is that's all captive. So here's the benefit of the junk box concept. This was in my junk box. I don't know even where it came from, but it does fit this type of connector. On the other end we've got some wires broken out, or we could cut it and make our own leads. Probably end up just snipping off this little connector here. I found a full schematic and some explanations of this unit online, so I don't have to try to figure out what the pinout of this would be if I want to get it working again. Tilting it back down again. Overall, this seems like a well-made unit. Probably good for what it was intended for, as far as it's basically a 3-channel amplifier with subwoofer and left and right. So we've got some possibilities here. We've got a subwoofer driver and box that's intact, although it, you know, looks terrible with this peeling decal. We've got what looks to be a pretty sturdy amplifier here. We're missing some units, and the value of this unit is not enough to you know, buy the add-ons to make it work, so that doesn't make any sense. But what I can do is potentially come up with something myself to plug into this. Basically this could be plugged into a conventional preamplifier, maybe with some adjustments like a low-pass filter to separate the subwoofer signal, something like that. So this has some potential. One of the downsides of it is that it's kind of so compact and integrated that you really can't reuse the modules as a whole that easily. You know, potentially the power supply could be pulled off separately and just used by itself and scrap the rest of it. We've got these power transistors. There's another 2 down here. Looks like we basically got one board for left and one for right, with a pair of transistors driving each of those channels. And maybe this board is the, yeah, that's right. This board may be the subwoofer board. I haven't looked at these closely, but it may be that all 3 of these boards are identical. So as a sort of a high-end computer speaker, this is a pretty cost-sensitive application. It's not like people are going to pay thousands of dollars for that. And I think these retail sold as a system, including the pieces I'm missing, in the, you know, $250, $300, $350 range, something like that, low hundreds. So they don't have a lot of extra money to spend on niceties. They have to go for low manufacturing cost. And you know, this seems to be a nice unit in the context of what can we do for a few $100 that's pretty high quality. Personally, I think they fell down on this decal business and this gasket. I'm not too impressed with this type of fiberboard. This basically looks like sandwiched paper, so it's nice if they're, you know, reusing recycled paper. That's a good thing. Save the environment, save the trees. But usually you see particle board in these things, and I don't know if there's really a difference, honestly. The requirement for this is to be very sturdy and dense, and it may be that this type of paper is just as good as particle board for that. So I'm being kind of picky based on what I'm used to seeing, but it may be in practice there's really no difference. This strange little plumbing pipe that they use for the port vent is not too impressive, but you know, again, it's on the inside, and this may meet the needs of the acoustics here being the right size and shape. I've set up this Bose Cinemate Acoustimass module that I took apart in one of my earliest videos. That's actually my most popular video, so check it out. But you can see some similarities and some differences here. The similarity that I see is that the box volume is approximately the same on both. These take a different approach to venting. We have this round vent hole as opposed to this horn type vent hole here. The Bose unit doesn't have a direct output from the speaker itself, so that's a difference compared to this. But there's an air gap here that must be part of the overall acoustic design. Here's the inside of the Bose unit. You can see a pipe that goes to the other side of the venting, and that's analogous to this pipe that I've been calling a plumbing pipe, although it really isn't. The size of the speaker drivers is about the same in the two units in all dimensions. This one may have a larger magnet, which probably means it could handle more power, but they're generally comparable. One of the differences here is that the front part of this box is empty, which ultimately leads to sound in some way coming through this top gap where my hand is, and that kind of contributes to the overall box volume. In this case, we've only got one compartment instead of two, but you know, you still need ultimately some way for air to move around the speaker front, as well as to equalize out on the back side for efficiency. For this type of speaker, as a ported speaker, it's going to have more efficiency than if this was a fully enclosed box, because the sound coming from the back of the speaker essentially gets reused through the porting system. Next, we're going to do an initial smoke test. I've got the output wires loose here, so I'm making sure those aren't touching. I've got it connected through this watt meter that I've been using. 120 volts. It's not turned on yet, so we expect 0 watts. Turn it on here. Settles in at something like 17 or 18 watts. That seems reasonable. It's a good sign so far. There's no lights or anything on this to tell me if it's working or doing anything, and I don't have anything connected to it. So the fact that the watts are reasonable is enough to go ahead and begin connecting inputs and outputs to it. As our next test, I've hooked up the driver through some alligator clips and a bunch of wires to my stereo driven by my phone. Got it set for 200 Hertz. Turn that on. That should be within the range of what this subwoofer could do. So the driver element itself works. Here's a pinout I found online that matches the colors that came off of this connector. So I've gone ahead and hooked my voltmeter up to ground for black and green, which is supposed to be plus 15 volts DC. So we're going to turn on the unit here and expect to see 15 volts or so on the voltmeter. Well, no luck on that. Let's look at our watts again. Oh, that's hertz. 17 watts, about what we saw before. Maybe I'll check my connections and get back. Went to yellow and got plus 15 versus the diagram says I should get minus 15 for that. So that tells me that my colors don't match the way I thought. We'll have to poke around and find out which is which. Turns out the colors on the cable didn't match the colors on this chart, so I've done some bugging out with my voltmeter and found out what's going on. So minus 15 matches my orange, and working all this all the way around, I ended up with what I was really interested in, which is red is for the subwoofer input. We've got, I'm calling it thick black. There's a thin wire, black wire, and a thick black wire that trace to the overall ground chassis of the unit. I've got this hooked up in kind of a jerry-rig thing with alligator clips. I've taped off my two voltages because I don't want to have any kind of shorts on those. Got red for the subwoofer and black for the ground of the subwoofer channel. I've reconnected things. I'm going directly from the phone to the power amplifier of the subwoofer. Got that turned on already, drawing close to 18 watts. Turn it on. There's our 200 hertz tone. It's not particularly loud, but we'll go from there. Let's do a quick frequency test. The phone will go down to 30 hertz. So I'm hearing this cut out at to my ear about the 60 hertz level. We'll see how high it goes. So seems to be loudest at maybe 300 hertz or so, 250. Really disappeared by 1 kilohertz. So that's a pretty good sign that everything is working as intended here. Now I found from other experiences that this phone is not a substitute for a true preamp because it only puts out enough volts to drive a small headphones and not really enough to drive a speaker system like this that's expecting a real preamp output. So this is only kind of a nominal working test and doesn't really tell us a whole lot about that everything's working level wise as it should. But that's a pretty good sign. So to summarize what we've got so far, we know that our driver element works. We know that the power supplies and the subwoofer audio chain work. The thing I haven't tested yet is the left and right power amplifiers. So that can be our next little project. I've got my voltmeter hooked up on the AC setting, and I've reconnected to a combination of, on this cable, the red and the brown, which is both the left and the right. Got my voltmeter hooked up to the left channel, showing 0 volts with everything off. I'm going to turn on the power strip, which has been off. Our expected watts there. We'll turn on this and see what we get. So 1.2 volts. And for comparison, we should be able to go up to a much higher frequency and still get some constant volts out. Now I know that this phone is pretty flat up to about 4 kilohertz. So we'll try that. Drop just a hair here, that might be the phone. Let's go down to 1 or 2. So approximately 2 kilohertz. We've dropped 2/10 or 1/10, but you know, basically flat. We'll turn off the source and see that go to 0. So the left channel is working, no problems. Just for fun, I'll look at the DC voltage, which should be 0 or very close to it. That's fine. It could be meter offset. I reconnected the voltmeter to this one on the other side, which is the left positive. That's the one that's got kind of the broken connector. So I might have to fiddle around with that to get it to contact in there. But we'll turn on the amp. Got the source turned off. So we're seeing about that same 1.09 volts there. Let's go down to our 200 hertz or so, approximately 1.27. So that shows me that this right channel works correctly, except that it's got the mechanical problem. So basically I've got a good unit here all the way around, aside from a couple of known and fixable problems. I can drive it on this end with maybe a real audio preamplifier, which I have. I've also got some mixer units that could do that as well. And everything's pretty good here, except for this one problem that still needs to be cured. Although I haven't put this back together yet, I've figured out what the problem is here. I thought it was something broken off. A lot of times plastic pieces like this have some sort of thing that breaks off, but it turns out that the spring is just missing over here. And to show you what that's like, this one kind of popped out, which I can just pop it back in, I think, if I'm lucky. So all these really do is, with a spring, they push it up against the top where the contact is in the top area. So to get really cheesy, this could be as simple as putting a rubber band around it or something. But I may be able to find a spring that fits in my junk box. Here I went ahead and took this one unit out with the spring. So that would be something I could take to a hardware store and try to match up. I know a hardware store nearby that has a large selection of springs. They're kind of expensive, like $3 each, but you know, I could live with that. Here it is after I put it all back together. I found out that we actually have two problems here. This terminal on the far left has little bits of plastic broken off of it, so that's not really going to last in the long run. This one I knew was missing the spring, so I could use this as a donor spring, but then I don't have anything on this end. So I'm going to look into maybe buying something that matches this. There's a problem here as far as this being a piece of metal, and you know, unless you find an exact match, it's kind of not going to look good after you hack that on in some way. So given the other cosmetic issues that this has, such as this peeling paper, I may just kind of redo this in some way. What I'm thinking for this for the future is redoing this kind of in a big way, taking all the paper off, putting some terminals on and things, and a switch so that I can either run this internal subwoofer or else route the subwoofer signal to a separate subwoofer driver unit. Turns out those are available in thrift stores pretty cheap, in the $7 to $10 range, and I've actually got one of them already that's sitting around that I've never even tried out. The unpowered subwoofers are plentiful and cheap because of the fact that there isn't a sort of a subwoofer amplifier module that's out there that you can at least get at thrift stores. You can probably buy it online. But all of the AV receivers that I've seen put out a line level output for the subwoofer channel, and that implies that you've got a powered subwoofer. So maybe there was a certain era where unpowered subwoofers were common and the amplifier provided a central powered output for those, but those days seem to be over based on what I'm seeing at thrift stores. That completes our look at this Klipsch ProMedia 2.1 subwoofer unit. Thanks for watching, and bye-bye.